welcome to our series on urban longings. This is the second part, and on the show today we will be discussing the need for new cities in India. But before we get to that, let me tell you a little bit more about Urban Longings. It's really been an initiative where we have tried to bring together the best minds in the country, the opinion makers, the influencers, and bring them all on a common platform to really address a key issue that is facing us as a nation, the whole concept of rapid urbanization, of this infusion that we are having of migration into our cities, the fact that we need good corporate planning and governance to manage all of this, and the common thread through all of this is trying to maintain some amount of environmental sanctity, trying to keep the environment pure as we try and address the issues of urbanization. Where is urban India going to live, and more importantly, how is urban India going to live? And to address all of this, we have a distinguished panel with us here, and without much further ado, let me start to introduce them. We have with us Mrs. Anu Aga, who's a director at Thermax. We have Mrs. Ashwini Bhide, who's the Joint Metropolitan Commissioner for the MMRDA. We have Mr. Arun Shourie, who's a journalist and also former World Bank economist. Dr. Majumdar, who's president and founder of Symbiosis. And finally, we have Mr. Anil Dharker, who's a columnist. Mrs. Aga, I want to throw this one over to you. You know, forget about the influx of another 250 or 300 million people that we will have in the next 20 years. Are we just at a state where even the current population is something that we're not being able to deal with?
Certainly we are not able to deal with. For example, take Pune, the lack of infrastructure. We have power shortage, water shortage, our transport is pathetic. So we have not catered for a city which is going to grow very fast. And yes, our facilities are pathetic. In Pune, our river, which is our lifeline, is neglected. Raw sewage is dumped into it. We have diseases like dengue, malaria coming up in a big way because there's so much of dirt everywhere. I don't know how we are going to manage.
Mrs. Bhide.
No, there are a lot of initiatives are being taken by the government, but the issues are complex. The issues are problematic. Basically, if you see in Mumbai, the 13 million population we have to take care of, and the infrastructure requirements, basically we are not able to cope up with our infrastructure requirements to the burgeoning population. Infrastructure in terms of housing, transport, sanitation, water supply, as well as the solid waste management. So despite our best efforts to take care of all these things, the issues are not getting resolved. At least that is what is being seen by the people. But government is trying its very best. In Mumbai, MMRDA is basically trying to tackle the requirements of transport infrastructure as well as the regional water supply, the regional landfill sites, sanitary landfill sites, because the cities are not able to cope up with all these problems. And I'm very sure in next 4 to 5 years, whatever efforts or initiatives MMRDA as well as the state government has taken to scale up its infrastructure status, most of the issues will be resolved, at least the intensity will go down.
Right. Mr. Shourie, you've been in the government, you've seen how easy it is to implement or difficult it is to implement. How do you see this whole issue? You know, what are the 3 big issues that you see in it, and you know, is there hope at the end of the tunnel?
The points she has made are very important, and they are the case for new cities. That actually speaking, with all the efforts of government and of sincere officers, this is just a holding operation in the metropolitan areas. You are going to need new cities. You are going to have the greatest growth is going to come in the small towns today. We have, to give you a figure, about 423 cities which are between 1 lakh and 1 million, and about 500 cities which are just about 1 lakh. Now in that case, that is where the explosive growth is going to come, and we should plan for them so that we don't have a holding operation at their cost also. You see, Bangalore has got choked. So Mysore and Mangalore are coming up, but there the infrastructure is small, so small that 10 companies come there and the whole place is choked. So you have to start planning there immediately and think of new cities. You know, China is today making 300 new cities. 300 new cities. And doing something to an existing building, existing slum, existing street is impossible in India. A new city with proper land use policies, with proper compensation policies, with acquisition of land policies, That's what we should be aiming at.
Right. So that actually throws up a whole host of issues that come along with it. Mr. Shourie, you spoke about China, but just to put some numbers in perspective, the kind of capital spend that we see coming from China and what we see in India, just on city development, on infrastructure development, in India it works out to as low as not even $20 per capita is the spend that we see, and for China, it's upwards of $100. Mr. Dharker, I wanted to come to you for this. So this is the whole China angle. If you look at it, the easiest solution would be, yes, come up with new cities, forget what we have. It's just, clean slate, start afresh. How realistic is it to actually imagine something like that?
We have to improve the cities which are there and simultaneously build new cities. I think both have to go together. It's not a question of one or the other. These are solutions which have to coexist. What has been happening is that the way we addressing the problems of our cities is always to get supply which tries to answer demand. It should be the other way around. And this is something we have to bear in mind, that unless you create the infrastructure first, and not with what we are doing now, is saying that, oh God, we have this problem, let's do some firefighting. And we are constantly firefighting. Our way of building, of taking care of our cities is to firefight. And firefighting can only be an emergency. It's not a way to go ahead.
Dr. Majumdar, you're an educationist, so to some extent I'm sure you must be dreaming a lot. How do you see the dream city where you would like to live?
I would like to give a different angle to the discussion that is going on. Personally, I feel that yes, new cities are required. There need not be any controversy on that. But can you think of giving some identity to new cities, purpose to new cities? And personally, I feel that why not think of creating edu cities or knowledge cities? If 21st century is the knowledge century and education is the most important aspect of development of any nation, and more so of India, then why not create edu cities or knowledge cities as they call it? Take for example Pune. Shouriji, Pune attracts highest number of international students. We have 20,000 foreign students from 80 different countries. We have 2 lakh students coming from different states of our country. And Pune infrastructure is just inadequate to provide them, forget admissions, even hostel admissions. And that creates a different problem.
Are you saying something like Oxford or Cambridge?
That's right. I was about to come to that. Oxford or Cambridge or Stanford. So let us create new cities, but let every city should have an identity, personality of its own. And personally, I dream of a UG city, especially near Pune, which is traditionally known as Oxford of the East.
This show brought to you by Samsung 3D LED TVs with true to life 3D depth.
इंडिया में पहली बार a film premiere every Sunday on your TV screen. Good luck. Bhangra! 7th November से a premiere every Sunday 3 p.m. Zoom Home Theatre.
टोनी, तू मेरा बेस्ट फ्रेंड है ना? मैं तुझे एक सीक्रेट बताऊं? तेरी मम्मी का वेज खाना मेरी मम्मी के नॉन वेज से अच्छा है।
न्यूट्रेला, अब जो सच है वो सच है।
टोनी, मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि मैं वेजिटेरियन बन जाऊँ।
Somewhere between a busy airport and a maddening schedule, you realize a road is not about a destination. Childhood is not just for children, and a day has only 86,400 moments. Dress code, read and tailor.
We're bringing this program to you from the city of Pune and see what the people on the street actually are seeing in terms of what's lacking in infrastructure in the city, what they would like to see, and really where the solutions lie.
There is a lack of government initiative in improving the infrastructure of Pune.
So we are behind. I've seen that every year roads are being repaired now and then, but every rainy season we again have potholes and many accidents take place, and there's lots of corruption in the government basically. That is why I think that the infrastructure in Pune is lacking behind.
First of all, this corruption should be stopped or maybe drastically controlled. Definitely government can do much better than the existing scenario.
Right. Mrs. Bhide, I have to come to you on this. You know, corruption is the only way to get things done quickly. That seems to be, the general voice that seems to be coming out. Better corporate governance for cities is what's required.
No, definitely, I fully agree, and I also basically empathize the views expressed by the people. Yes, corruption is a all-pervasive phenomena, but just by removing corruption, all issues will be solved. That is a very simplistic kind of a scenario. There are problems. Corruption may be one of them. We need to fight together, both within the government and without the government. Everybody will have to fight against it together. But apart from that, even citizens have to come forward. Everybody talks about the traffic rules on the road, but people hardly use the public transport. Everybody wants to use their own vehicle. It may be a two-wheeler, it may be a four-wheeler. So unless there is a proper demand for public transport, the public transport companies can't cope up with their existing problems. If they have to address that, there has to be a proper demand. Then you can have a better public transport infrastructure. In Mumbai, yes, people are used to public transport, but the existing public transport is overloaded. So that is why MMRDA is trying to create 150 kilometer of metro network. But in Pune, if you see, the situation is exactly different. People are used to the private transport. So basically, everybody needs to change their habits. Even think of the sanitation, think of the hygiene. Even individual people have to change their habits. You can't blame everything on the government. Yes, to a large extent government is responsible, but you can't change everything. There has to be a proper hand-holding with between government and the citizen groups, between government and the private sector, with corporate sector, and then only things will change. Right. And if we see that kind of vision, definitely there will be a change.
I'll come back to the discussion on, yeah, sure.
I think I disagree with one or two points that you've raised. One, I think, is the corruption is the problem. It's not one of the problems, especially when it comes to land use. What happens is the usage of land, the giving away of land is solely in the hands of the government, the state government. Now we've seen everywhere in India, this is used as a means of raising money. It's the biggest source of corruption. So what happens is that land is given not because it should be used in a particular way, but because the more money comes from that particular builder or developer, etc. So you're selling land to the highest bidder, not to the best use of that land. And I think this is a huge problem. And we see this in Mumbai more than anywhere else. Now we've got draconian laws to control the use of land, which you know about. Now these are selectively diluted by the government, in a very ad hoc way, that you allow. Now the parking is the big thing in Bombay. Because of the shortage of parking, you give builders, if they do parking spaces, they get concessions in how much they can build. Now builders are very clever, and they started misusing this. Now why, if you had planned the city, even now in existing Bombay, we've got 600 acres of mill land. Now if you look at Nariman Point is 65 acres. So we are talking of almost 10 times as much area being developed.
Important point there, absolutely. This builder mafia, on the one hand you want the private sector to come in, on the other hand you seem to be finding a conflict between the profit motive of the builder and the general motive that you should have of actually uplifting the absolute standard of living of the people in the cities. It's something that needs to be looked at. Supply demand, that's the other thing. We talk about shortage of housing, we talk about lack of space in cities, and yet if you go to cities like Gurgaon, you will see buildings and buildings which are completely unoccupied, fully ready houses, possessions being given, but nobody living there. So these kind of ironies exist. We talk about dream cities, Mr. Shourie, this big disconnect, how is it ever going to get filled?
See, firstly, by our owning responsibility. Yes, there is corruption, but has a bribe ever been received before it has been given? Who's giving the bribe? One of us? bribe ever been received before it has been given? Who's giving the bribe? One of us? Similarly, one of us is receiving it. And just one second.
Nothing moves.
No, well, their point. Therefore, we have to attend to the system. I mean, it's not difficult to think of the changes that would be brought about which would do something about corruption. But civil society has to take the initiative, everybody has to get together, media has not to become also a part of the whole game that is there. I think that is one point. Therefore, what Mrs. Bhide has been saying, each of us must own responsibility rather than saying this is the problem of government, this is the problem of the building mafia. Arey bhaiya, they are our people who are mafias and so on. We patronize them. Abhi koi smuggler, one of the big smugglers in India, if he were to come in, you just see how everybody in a social gathering will greet the fellow. So we are responsible in that sense. But could I go back to this? You see, you have to have many types of solutions. And we should not dismiss the example of Singapore just by saying it is only a city-state. Sanjeev Sanyal, who writes a lot on these matters, he pointed out very well. He said with its population of 5 million, Singapore has only 6 cities in India which are larger than Singapore. And their squalor was as great 20, 30 years ago as of Calcutta today or Bombay today. And you'll be surprised to know that 90% of the population of Singapore lives in public housing. And that is, no free houses were provided. But the poor were enabled to buy those houses by well-structured, well-conceived loans, and by also by providing grades of different types of public housing. Not everything Indira Awas Yojana. So even very rich people were able to go and buy very expensive condominiums. And those were used to subsidize the others. And there was a complete partnership, not suspicion. But there has to be then a Lee Kuan Yew type of will, that I will make the thing better. It's lacking in India. We are not aspiring for these dream cities. We scoff at them. We don't want to work at them. So solutions are possible, and the first starting point is each of us owns responsibility for bringing the state of affairs to this pass.
This week on the Leaders of Tomorrow series, catch the success of the Imperial Sunrise Process Equipments and Accurate Products.
We produce a lot of knitted garments and woven garments to the European market. I wanted to grab the opportunities, I utilized the opportunities and went on expanding.
I was in Japan for a few months to make myself familiar with the operation of these machines.
Leaders of Tomorrow, only on ET Now.
Brought to you by Indiamart.com. More buyers, more suppliers, more business.
Meeting? Now? Ginza Complex now, fast! お客さん見てください。とっても美味しいね。No, no, Ginza Complex fast! 一番美味しいお店にお連れしますよ。Ginza Complex 急いで。わかりました。
Access the world of interesting apps on your LG Optimus smartphone. Life's good when you live interestingly.
10 million to 15 million people that you're talking of who come into the job market require a variety of skills. And a large number of these skills do not need college education. They need probably secondary level education. More importantly, during the period of secondary education, get them to have vocational skills. I think that is probably the biggest missing link today.
Catch KV Kamath in an exclusive conversation on ET Interview, only on ET Now.
Reports actually suggest that all of the economic growth that's happening is all happening around urban clusters simply because those are clusters where it becomes economically viable to provide basic living amenities to most people. And if you're going to see in the next 20 years, you're expected that 70% of the GDP is actually going to come from your cities. If you're going to have 70% of new employment generated, it's all going to be from your cities. So to basically provide that kind of employment generation, to provide that living for another 300, 400 million Indians, the expanse has to grow. It can't be the top 10 cities. It can't even be tier 1 and tier 2. It has to grow from that. There are different ways in which this can grow, and Lavasa actually is one such structure that's come up. And Mr. Shourie, I'll come to you because you actually live there, so you can tell us, what you feel about it.
Actually, we should think of green cities partly in green buildings, but also the footprint of the city as a whole. Dharker was emphasizing that. The thing about Lavasa and all is going to be everything is within walkable distance. My house is halfway up the hill, but it will literally take me just 10 minutes to walk down. Literally 10 minutes. And you can easily have a walk up. So this idea in a new city that everything is compact together and it is not zoned, that here is residence, here is hospital. Otherwise, everybody will be traveling by car from here to there. Here, everything is within walking distance. This is one point. Second, it is an excellent example that this whole debate in India, either cities, either industry or environment, is wrong. Actually, you can do both things together. It's a very important lesson, preserving the environment, enriching the environment. We don't have to sit in a studio. You please come and see on the ground how topsoil is being preserved, how trees are being planted, how this hillside looked 5 years ago and what happened now, how there was slash and burn agriculture and now how people are doing something completely different, how check dams have been built. All that is development and all that is environment. So this either or business, which we always keep thinking of in India, is not the way to go about it.
Even within Bombay, as you rightly said, if you're looking currently at around 20-25 million people, the center of the city can't take more than 13 to 15 million. That's I mean, its capacity bursting at its seams. But then, of course, the government has some interesting plans there of the hub and spoke model, which is very important. That's another way of developing cities and developing urbanization, land and space planning there. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Coming back to the metropolitan region, what we are planning, on one side we are trying to improve the infrastructure, trying to stop the incoming of people by creating housing on the periphery. They're through a rental housing scheme, because the main problem in Mumbai is the acute shortage in the housing infrastructure. That is the main problem, and then it throws out all lot of other problems. So MRDA is trying to create rental housing units on the periphery of the city, so that those who are coming outside with a job or some kind of occupation, they get some place to stay on a minimum rent. And apart from that, we are basically trying to improve the transport infrastructure in such a way that it leads to a particular growth center, so that the metro corridor or a highway corridor, it will go to a certain area where there is a potential growth center. And we have already identified such greenfield areas within the metropolitan region, and MMRDA has a history of creating this kind of a growth center by way of BKC, Bandra Kurla complex. That is why the center of even the business has shifted from Nariman Point to BKC, which is at the mid of the city. Similarly, we want to replicate this experience in the entire region, and 11 spots we have already identified as growth centers. Our comprehensive transport study, which is planned up to 2031 with horizon years in between 2016 and 2021, we have planned our transport network in such a way that it will lead to these growth centers. So on one hand, we are trying to improve the infrastructure of the city and the other cities in the region, at the same time create new growth centers so that they will be additional magnets, and the load and the stress on the existing cities will be reduced.
And as a corporate, Mrs. Aga, do you think corporates would buy into this, and we would see investments coming in from there, more public-private partnerships that would help these kind of concepts to grow?
Corporates will do something which is, of course, adds to their bottom line, but also they do have the welfare of the city in which they live also in mind. Not everyone, but some will. Instead of taking the migration figures as given, why not really consider developing rural areas so that the basic infrastructure is improved and people do not have the need to migrate in large numbers? I think we cannot just assume that so many will come to the cities because we have neglected the rural areas.
I think only one thing in these new cities, it has to be planned in such a way that it has to be self-sufficient in terms of employment, in terms of all services. Otherwise what happened, maybe New Mumbai is a glaring example. When it was planned, basically it's still dependent on Mumbai. And unless there was the railway line, the suburban train, which was not there, and Sidco basically, who built the New Bombay, they had to invest into that. And only when the suburban line came, that only New Bombay really flourished. Actually, that should not happen now. But of course, over a period of time, as I said, the city building is a process, and over a period of time, it starts showing its result. New Mumbai now, almost 50 to 60% population is dependent on New Mumbai only. They don't come to Mumbai for their employment. So this, when you plan a city, I think if Lavasa is there or any other city is there, if again the population is dependent on for their occupation on some other neighboring city, and then you don't have a proper connectivity, then they will be just holiday homes.
Final words, actually, we've come to the end of the show. Mr. Shourie, you were trying to say something.
If these are final words, I just have 4 sentences. First, we must in India give up this habit of either or. It should always be and also. Second, that all the shortages which Mrs. Bhide and everybody has identified and the problems are a great opportunity for India's growth for tomorrow, waste management and so on. And third, that we must see that you can't have solutions for today's problems by working only on them. That, as Dharker said, is firefighting. We must imagine the future 30 years ahead and start engineering it back to reality today. And for all that, do as the Buddha would say, act with the urgency of a man whose hair are on fire.
Well, you've done my job for me, sir. That's a perfect way to conclude the show. You know, we wanted to talk about really the need for new cities. Urban Longing is an initiative where we really want you to actually think about all of these issues, the facts, things like rainwater harvesting, bringing carbon neutrality in your own areas where you live. That's something that's very doable. Try and reduce the amount of fuel that we let go into the environment, do carpooling, etc. All these kind of initiatives really help just better our standard of living within the areas that we are in. And of course, new city initiatives is something that's a given now. The way we're seeing population explosion in urban India, there will be need for it, and it's for us to start to try and actually believe in our own future and make sure that all of this comes through. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as we enjoyed doing it.
You want your own trappings around you, perhaps even your own course or your own friends. But I've had to necessarily go well beyond that. So I play very sporadically in many different cities at different times, perhaps with different sets and certainly different people. And that's given me a bigger, wider appreciation of the game.
Charu Sharma takes a break from broadcast to reflect on cricket, Commonwealth and more. Tea time with Shelly Chopra only on ET Now.
मुल्तान की ट्रिपल सेंचुरी के बाद मेरी लाइफ एकदम बदल गई। मैं रात-रात स्टार बन गया। खराब फॉर्म में मुझे टीम से ड्रॉप भी कर दिया गया था। जब तक आपका बल्ला चल रहा है तब तक आपके ठाट है। बल्ला चलना रुकेगा तो
बिरला सन लाइफ इंश्योरेंस के वेल्थ विद प्रोटेक्शन सॉल्यूशंस जिंदगी के उतार चढ़ाव में जियो विश्वास के साथ।
This week on the Leaders of Tomorrow series, catch the success of the Imperial, Sunrise Process Equipments and Accurate Products.
We produce a lot of knitted garments and woven garments to the European market.
I wanted to grab the opportunities, I utilized the opportunities and went on expanding.
I was in Japan for a few months to make myself familiar with the operation of these machines.
Leaders of Tomorrow, only on ET Now.
Brought to you by IndiaMart.com. More buyers, more suppliers, more business.
Rock show and College Festival. Idol show.
Just gonna get a haircut, man. All barber shops here are closed today.
India Times Travel. Fares so low, everyone has an excuse to fly.
There is, through the G20 process today, very strong pressure, very strong momentum towards driving a new global financial governance system. And this, we think, will be the main outcome of this crisis.
bond prices are the path of interest rates, and interest rates are driven by real growth and inflation. Don't see pressures that would create falling bond prices.
Business intelligence from global financial experts, only on ET Now.
Asking your wife to cook dinner late at night because you skipped the cold airline food is asking for trouble. Why not enjoy hot Indian meals on board SpiceJet?
This is the Times Television Network, and you're watching ET Now.